Hello, everybody. So, if you clicked on this video, the title is What if jQuery was functional? And what I mean by functional is functional programming. And, the reality is that a lot of us have been doing web development for decades. And before ES6 or ES5 in 2015, can't remember which one it was, but jQuery or JavaScript was unusable for web development, and we weren't making web applications. React wasn't even around. Either was Node. So a lot of us started using jQuery. I don't use it very much anymore, or I don't use it at all anymore, really. But a lot of people do, and there's serious reasons, legitimate reasons why you still want to use jQuery because it works. If you're making WordPress sites, jQuery is already included. So, give up on the debate about whether the file or whether the library is too big. It's there already. So why not use it for little things, little bits of interactivity that, or when you don't have access to the server and you still need to change some content on the website using JavaScript. So anyway, there's reasons for it. And functional programming is many things. It's one of those things, concepts that doesn't have a strict definition. We talk a lot about pure functions and monads and things like that. We're not going to worry about that because jQuery is mainly about selecting a DOM element and then modifying it somehow. So, for example, here I've got an H1 with some text and a little snippet of jQuery where we get the H1 and then we change the color to blue, and that's being applied right here. Um, but I want to show you how we can curry this function, and that will allow us to do something called partial function application, which can be really handy. It can also just make it look a little nicer. So before I show you how to do that, I want to show you how it would be used once you create the function, the curried version of this function. And then I'll show you how to actually make the function. But I think it's better to see what we're going for. So what I want to do is I want to do the same thing as I'm doing up here, but I want to make a function called CSS. So if we had one called CSS, what I'd want to do is call the function like this, where we just provide three arguments. And this doesn't work right now because we haven't created the CSS function. So I'm going to comment this out to prove that, so we just have default color here. Um, but when we partially apply or when we curry the function, it will allow for partial application. So then we could call the function like this. Um, where we're invoking actually three functions, but all at one time. So remember, the parentheses in JavaScript actually invoke a function. So CSS and then parentheses, and it's going to invoke the function with this one argument called h1. So we could do it like that. And I sometimes like to, when I'm calling a function like this, I like to put spaces in between here. You can do that if you want to or not. Um, So we've partially applied it, but we haven't done anything except introduce weird syntax that's unfamiliar. But what we could do is we could rearrange the order of the arguments. So we could call it like, let me just copy this. In functional programming, we tend to like to provide the data last. And even though an H1 doesn't sound like data here, it really is. It would make more sense if we were grabbing the value of an input like a number input and grabbing the value out of it. Let's say it was the number two, and then like that would make more sense as data. But since we're working with jQuery and jQuery is about manipulating the DOM element is our data. And so we want to pass it last, and you'll see why in a second. But then we could do something like use the same function and create a partially applied function called CSS color or whatever you want to call it, and then pass it blue, and then the data you want to apply it to, like the H1. And then you could go even further and make one called CSS color blue or whatever you want to call it, and then just apply that to the H1. And in functional programming terminology, we instead of saying we call a function with an argument, we say we apply a function to an argument or to a value or something. So I use those interchangeably here. And then, of course, if you don't like this space, you could just call it like that. Um, so that's what partial application is going to allow you to do. So how do we do that? Let me comment this stuff out for now and go back to our original jQuery function. And what this is, the dollar sign is the name of the function, is the name of the jQuery function. It's an alias to it. And then we're calling that function with the DOM element that we want to interact on. And then we chain these methods. You can typing dot and then another method and then invoke that and keep going. But we'll keep it simple for now. Uh, but if we break this down and we kind of abstract what this is, to make a reusable function, I'm going to make the function from the right to the left. Um, we've got our jQuery function, or you could just type jQuery, but I'm going to use the dollar sign. And then we're going to pass it a node, a DOM node. So that's like like a parameter for the function. And then we have the CSS method, and then it takes two arguments, the CSS property, so I'll call it prop, and the CSS value, which I'll call value. And then at this point, we have the body of the function done, the body of our curried function. So in order to use this function, we need some arguments or parameters, and then we also need to name the function. So let's start with the arguments. We need the node, the prop, and the value. I'm not going to deep dive into how this is working behind the scenes. Maybe I'll do that in another video. If anyone's interested in this stuff, leave a comment if you are. But for now, just do it like this. Well, actually, we'll step it through it a couple ways. I'm going to use an arrow function. If you're not familiar with that, this is the body of the function and it's returned. And this is where the arguments go. And we need a node. Just look over here at what you need and put it over here. We need a node, a prop, and a value. And then so now, well, we need to name it. So I'll name it CSS. And then now we should be able to use this version of the function here and give it a second to refresh. And there we go. So this much right here is still kind of nice. It's just cleaner. You don't have to worry about the syntax. You don't need the dot stuff. A lot of people don't like the dot. It's very object-oriented programming. Um, but we can't really partially apply this function unless the data comes last. Like here, it doesn't matter because we're just calling a function with three arguments. But what I'm going to do is comment this out, and we're going to curry this function. So instead of passing all the arguments at one time, we're going to use three functions, and but all very concise. So I'm going to start and reorder these, move the node to the end. So I'm going to start with the prop, and then use the fat arrow. And this is going to return another function that takes the value, and then another fat arrow, and then the node. So this is still going to work. We just calling things differently, and we're going to call them like this. And oh, and I see, since I've changed the order of the arguments, I need to move this one to the end. That should do it. A bit of a delay rendering, but now that's blue. So now we've got a curried function. And what this is doing is it's calling this function with the prop, and it's going to return back a new function which has two arguments. So basically this replaces this, and then we have two arguments. Since we have parentheses right here, we're calling the function that's being returned, this stuff up here from value to the end, but we're only passing it with one more argument, the value. So it's going to return a third function, which is just this much. So in functional programming, we strive to only make functions with one argument. Uh, so anyway, that what I have highlighted up here is going to replace all of this. And then we invoke that new function with this third argument, because of the parentheses. Now we've got all our arguments, so we'll evaluate this expression and then return the value. Um, and actually, it doesn't return a value; it returns undefined or void because it's actually a side effect, and it's applying the CSS to the DOM. Mostly in functional programming, we return a value. So this is a side effect, and that's fine. I mean, that's what we do in real life. It's not all you know reports and things. But now we can partially apply this function. So let me go back to what I had because I realized I have that version right here. So let's just make sure. Yeah, and so that's still working, and that's the partially applied data last curried function. And then let's say I want to make another function based on this function that's more specific. And in this case, I want to go ahead and make a CSS color function. And then the CSS color function will only need two arguments, the color and the DOM node that we're going to apply to it. So you can partially apply it. We'll go left to right this time. We'll make the function called CSS color, or whatever you want to call it. And we will call the CSS function that's right above it and just partially apply the first argument, which is the color property. I'm going to continue to do the syntax like this. So now that we have that, let's comment this out, make sure it goes back to black. Okay, there we go. And then now we can call the function, our partially applied function, like this. And then we get the same result. So what's cool about that is like you could make another function called, well, yeah, we don't have to make another function. We can just copy this function and make one that says red and apply that to the paragraph. Let me add a paragraph here with just a bit of text. And there we go. And we've got a red thing. So we're reusing this same function, and then we've made a more specific version of that function using partial application, which we can do because we've curried the arguments. That's all this means. When you curry a function, it just means that you are separating the arguments into different function calls. Um, and then we can go further. Let's say I commonly need to apply the CSS color blue. Again, you can name this whatever you want. And I'll do that by using the CSS function on the top and applying the color, the first argument, and the second argument, blue, but I'll leave the third one out. And so now I can go in here and let me just comment these. And then I just need to pass the element. I'll pass the H1, right? So you can go in and make your specific functions without like reduplicating things. I could have also gone in here and instead of saying CSS color blue and calling the CSS function, I've already got the CSS color, so I could call the CSS color function and spell it correctly and just pass uh yeah, CSS color. Oh wait a second. CSS color blue. Yeah, so pass the color and then I pass blue and then I can just call that function and pass the last argument. I've already done this. Yeah, I already did this. But my point is, it works. Like you don't always have to start from the most generic function. You can make a more specific version and then an even more specific version of that version, and keep partially applying and building up your thing. So let's say you had like a branding guide for your website and you had five different colors and you wanted to be able to apply those colors to uh, the text of the element, you could make five different ones. You could make CSS color blue, CSS color red, CSS color primary, secondary. That's just one use case that I can think of. And then use it like this. And then what becomes even cooler, I'll leave this and I'll put the description, I'll put a link to this code pen in the description. Let me tighten this up a bit just to give us some more room. Yeah. Okay. So let's say we have another one, another common one, the attribute, ATTR. And that one has a name and a value. So let's say we did title and yo. And that's on H1. So if I go and inspect and I look at the H1, let me do it like, oh, down here. So if I inspect that H1, we have the title of yo applied to it after the element has rendered, jQuery is doing it. So what if we wanted to partially apply it? Well, it's virtually identical. I'm just going to copy this and I'm going to change the function name to ATTR and change the function here to ATTR. And it's not a prop, it's a name. So we change that in both places. And this is all left over. Let me move this down to here. And so we'll comment this out, but that's what we're trying to do. So now we can do the same thing. We can call the ATTR function. We can pass in the name, which would be the name of the attribute, which would be title in our case. And the second one would be the value, which would be yo. And then finally our data last, which is the element, and that was the H1. And then that should do the same thing. So let's go back and inspect and make sure. Yeah, there we go, title yo. So, but we can still partially apply it. We could say attr title, and then we could call our attr and partially apply it with the title. And then that means when we go down here, we can do, we've already passed the title. We just call our new function attr title, and then we get yo. Give it a second to update. And if we did that correctly, we still have the same thing. One more quick example just to drive this through. I'm going to make a button. Actually, let's do this first. Let's do another one with the CSS. Let's go in here and say const CSS font size. And we can reuse our CSS one again, and we could say, I mean, we could say font size 3 even, and partially apply it by saying CSS, and we are going to pass in the prop of font size and the value of 3 rems as a string. And then when we call this function, CSS font size 3, and we just need to pass it the DOM node. So like, let's do the paragraph. And there we go. We just applied that. So again, we can keep reusing this base function because it's curried. I call it a base function. That's not like a particular known vocabulary word. That's just what I'm calling it. But the, you know, the curried function. And then I'm going to do one more curried function. This one is almost identical to the attr. We're going to do one for prop. So for like the HTML, yeah, property. I'm not sure exactly what prop means in this context, but there's a prop function in or method, I guess, in jQuery, but here we're turning it into just a standalone function. And the same thing, it takes a name, a value, and a node. So we could let's make a button. And because the paragraph is doing that, I'm going to move the button to the top. Just so it doesn't move. So there's our button. You can see it doesn't do anything. But what we could do is we could take uh, our prop function and call it with the property called disabled to exist on a button. And second, we could call it true. So that would be like disabled equals true if you were to do it as an attribute here. Um, and then we just need to tell it what element to apply it to. And this needs to be a string. And there you go. Now it's applied the disabled to that button. And that's something we do a lot. You know, you click on something like a submit button, and then if it's not disabled after you click on it while it's submitting, the user could keep clicking on it over and over again and end up sending, you know, submitting the form 5 times. And, you know, maybe you've been given a form, you don't have any control over that form, but you want to solve that problem. You could do it with jQuery using your prop. And, you know, you've got this one function that you could use for any prop. And then, of course, you could partially apply it, prop disabled, name it whatever you want. And then you just need to pass true and then the element that you want to apply it to. Comment that one out. And this one did not work. Prop disabled equals, oh yeah, sorry. we are partially applying it, but we have to tell it the function that we're partially applying it to. That did not work either, though. Prop disabled. I see. I'm sorry. Let me take another crack at that one. It's just like this one above it. Prop disabled is prop, and we apply the first argument disabled, and that is a function, so we'll name it, and then we'll use it. Sorry about that. And in order to use it, so let's actually call this one prop disabled true and apply it with two arguments like this. And then here, we would just need to tell it the element, and we'd say button. I feel like that'll work now. Crossing my fingers. Prop disabled. Okay, there's the function prop. Calling it prop disabled true. Oh, I'm not calling the right function. Oh, coding in real time. It was fun. That finally worked. So sorry, I started making some mistakes here at the end of the video, but this is my point is that you don't have to use the latest and greatest and fanciest JavaScript to be able to use functional programming techniques. And this is not all the functional programming techniques that are out there, um, but the curried functions, which allow partial application, is very handy, and it can be used in other things. So my next idea, if people are interested in this, is to show you how to use the pipe or compose function, which are two standard functions in functional programming that will allow you to chain these things together in case you want to do more than just one function at a time, because with jQuery itself, you can keep chaining functions together, prop and then blah, 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 and then adder. I don't know if these are functions that make sense to chain together, but this format is something that you can do. And pipe and compose will let you do that. So if this is interesting to anyone, let me know in the comments and I will work on that and make another little video. Otherwise, thank you for spending your time with me. Tell a friend, and I will see you again soon.